Hey everybody, Dustin DePirac here, columnist Jeremy Price. While everybody else was watching Ohio State, Michigan State, and Auburn, Missouri, and all kinds of good football, we had this one. We can't complain. Let's be serious. That would be ridiculous. Anyway, Indiana wins 89-68 over North Florida. Coming back off the disappointing loss, obviously Tuesday against Syracuse, and it seemed like they sort of made a point, I think, to do a lot of things well that they hadn't done well really against Syracuse. And the biggest thing I thought tonight was they really made a point, I thought, to really move the ball, especially early, just really made a point to make the next pass and just get space through ball movements, through body movement, but mostly just through just continuing to pass the ball, just continuing to find the next guy, look for the open man. I don't know if they've done a better job at that this year, just moving the ball as well as they did tonight.
No, I don't think they have, and the statistics would bear that out. A season-high 17 assists tonight, and yeah, it was definitely a priority coming out of the gate tonight to move the ball, especially after that second half at Syracuse, where most of the ball movement involved throwing it to a Syracuse player.
Yeah,
so,
which is not what
better.
you want.
But on the other hand, let's face it, North Florida trotted out man-to-man zone, even a little bit of a half-court trap zone sort of look for a little bit, and it really didn't matter what they threw out there. Indiana was just too good.
It was obviously just a case where obviously Indiana was substantially more athletic than North Florida, and I think obviously with this game, like with games like this, you kind of go into it knowing you're going to win it, but it's sort of like, what can you get accomplished within the game? What can you find out about yourself? What can you work on? It's not a glorified practice. Doesn't really put it in perspective. It's a little bit it's a little bit harsh, but it is like, okay, like let's focus on doing something well tonight. Let's one consistent thing, and that's obviously what Indiana did. And said, okay, like we have a problem with moving the basketball. Part of the reason we don't shoot well, one, it's just not a really good shooting team. There's not a lot of great shooters on this team, but it can get to be a lot better, at least serviceable, if guys have wide open shots. There's at least a few guys on this team that can knock down wide open threes, fewer that can knock down contested ones. In this case, they found guys open who were willing to shoot. Austin Etherington hits a couple. Obviously, we know he can shoot a little bit. Jeremy Hollowell hit one. Yogi Ferrell certainly hit a couple. Evan Gordon played without question his best game tonight. Was able to hit it, knock down a three, and it shows that hey, if they do get wide open looks, they've got guys that can hit them, and I think at least gives them a little bit more confidence as shooters that hey, if it's there as a group, these guys can hit. They don't have to take it to the bucket every single time.
Yeah, and this was like you say, kind of a sort of a get your confidence back situation tonight.
Obviously.
And which they did a good job of that. And they had 7 assists to 1 turnover through, I think, the first 8 minutes of the game. Then that little turnover bugaboo reared its ugly head for a bit.
Yeah, there was just kind of a messy stretch where everybody threw the ball away. It was just like no one could really catch anything. No one could throw. I saw Noah Vonleh kind of led Troy Williams on the go route. He was a little bit long on that. There was safety help over the top anyway, so he really had to throw the ball away. But yeah, so there was some general ugliness at that point. But for the most part, they were able to get didn't have a lot of that. Had one stretch where there was about 7 in a few minutes, but only 4 really the rest of the game. More or less had better decision making than we've seen from them.
And like you said, a really, really a good night off the bench. Etherington hit a couple of threes. He's been sort of slowly creeping up the depth chart the last few games, it seems like. And I mean,
like I said, it's almost like Hunger Games with him and Colin Hartman. There's one of those guys is getting that spot. I don't know what's going to happen to have it. I mean, it might be, might have to scratch and claw and fight each other. I'm not sure, but
yeah, I think
one of those guys plays.
The difference there is that I feel like Etherington's the guy that's going to give you more as far as the shooting role goes. Hartman might be the guy that gives you some of the other stuff a little better.
He is now, yeah. I think
that's kind of where the decision's going to have to come when you get into the higher level games. When you get into the Big Ten season, which do you want? Do you want Etherington for the shooting, or do you want Hartman to be a little better rebounding, a little better defense,
a little scrappier, stuff like that?
Stuff like
which
that.
I think is sort of what part of the reason why it's a competition as well is that you should be able to expect that from a guy who's been around a little while. Expect a little bit more from that. I mean, I think I think Crean does in certain aspects play Hartman first in cases to get Etherington fired up and say, look, like this guy's
right.
Playing with a little bit more energy out there, maybe than you are, and I don't know that Hartman is any more gifted in those aspects necessarily than Etherington is. I think Etherington can match that, and certainly is a guy who's got a good head on his shoulders as a basketball player. I think that's one thing both of those guys have is pretty good basketball IQ. I don't know if I think Crean would certainly like to see more of that from Etherington. He's certainly capable of it. I think there's more that he wants to see from Austin, and I thought you saw some of that tonight. And I thought he was pretty good in most respects. Certainly shot it pretty well. But I think that is. I think you're right in that regard. They are getting more of that from Hartman, but they certainly, I think, can expect more of it from Etherington.
And I think for Etherington, I feel like Crean kind of believes in him, or believes what he, like you mentioned, what he's capable of doing. I think maybe it's a little bit a matter of Austin believing in Austin and having the confidence to take the shot when he's got the opportunity to feel like he can get out there and contribute, which, he's been limited, obviously, in his chances to do so while he's here. And, of course, he's coming off the injury from last year, and I would guess he's probably feeling as well as he's felt in that front in the last 12 months. So.
Yeah. We talked a lot about those other guys, but, Evan Gordon, again, 15 points, 7 for 9 from the field, made his first 7 shots. I think he's a guy that can be very important, and he's been sort of quiet so far. This, I think, was the sort of game. Again, obviously it's North Florida, so it's a little bit different. This isn't the same as doing it against Syracuse or doing it against Connecticut or anything like that. But I think you saw just kind of a glimpse of what they can maybe someday get from him. He can go to the rim a little bit. He can hit some outside shots, mid-range and from 3, defend a little bit, give you some energy when it all comes together. I thought if this is the player he can become, he can be pretty valuable for us.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And Syracuse obviously that game got out of hand quickly and not much chance to show a lot there. But I thought the Connecticut game, he was very good down the stretch of that game, had a couple key buckets there. The LIU game, when Indiana came back here earlier this year, I thought he was very key late in that game as well. So he definitely shows a lot. And I think the combination of Gordon and Stan Robinson, or the two, that was what jumped out at me tonight, is those two guys made significant contributions, and I think those two guys need to continue to make significant contributions, if for no other reason than to give Yogi Ferrell some support and kind of relieve some of the pressure on Yogi right now, because sometimes it feels like Yogi's the only guard on the team at times.
Yeah, and a lot of times he is. I think they kind of got to go with those two guys just a little bit more, one or the other. I get that everybody's kind of freaked out about playing two guards at the same time after, because everybody sort of blames that on, the Syracuse loss on that a little bit, not this past one, but the one in March, for playing Ferrell and Hulse at the same time and having 2 6-foot guards against all that length. But obviously obviously Jordan Hulse is a different player than either Stan Robinson or Evan Gordon. His shooting ability is something that neither one of them have. But in the same sense, I don't think it's a horrible idea to have 2 guards on the floor at the same time. I think Indiana's been at its best in recent years in the Tom Crean era when they've had 2 guys that can really handle the basketball. That one obviously can score off a high ball screen, pick and roll sort of situation, but also just guys who they're confident just getting the ball, just to run the offense, to slow it up a little bit, that sort of thing. And if Yogi's not in the game, for all this Hollowell experimentation with that. There are certain things he can do, but I don't know that he necessarily really can run a team. Evan Gordon and Stan Robinson have at least some capability of that. I don't know that Crean necessarily trusts them a whole lot yet. Certainly trusts Stan maybe a little bit less than Evan Gordon, but I think both of those guys, you need to have more occasions when you've got 2 real guards on the floor. Yeah,
and Crean touched on this a little bit in the post-game press conference. The offensive part is key, but what those 2 guys can bring you defensively is just as important, if not more so. And particularly in Robinson's case, because Robinson is the only big guard on this team, and he gives a different look. And I noticed at one point, I think he switched off on Dallas Moore, who looked like Shabazz Napier out there at times
he was
tonight.
All over the place. He was awesome.
But he really did a nice job on him because he gives him a much different look. At 6'4", Robinson has a lot more length and quickness, and forced him into a turnover out here at midcourt, as a matter of fact, if you might recall that play.
Yeah.
So, I think what they can bring that way and the different looks they provide on the defensive end are just as important as what they maybe provide offensively.
Yeah. No, I think, to your point, Gordon can certainly provide you a lot, but Robinson has, I think, the really high ceiling, I guess. Again, being 6'4", having, I think, the ability at least to handle it pretty well. Just to, a 6'4" guy that can play as a guard. There's obviously a lot of length on this team, but none of those guys are really guards, are really good ball handlers. I think Robinson can be. Certainly, I think what concerns about him is the fact that he still does turn the ball over a little bit much. He's still a little bit loose with it. There was one play, I think, after he made a really nice drive and dish to Perea for a dunk that, was just he had a couple of really solid plays to kind kind of create space and find people underneath for easy buckets. But then he got going in transition, but he was pretty much bracketed by two North Florida defenders, and then he just lost the ball. And like there's sometimes he's just a little bit loose with it, and he's trying to do too much, and he's still, as Crean has pointed out, he's just, he doesn't necessarily understand yet that it doesn't have Indiana branded on it. They can take it from you. Like there's nothing that says they can't really just knock the ball out of your hand. You got to be tighter with it and protect it more, and he's not necessarily there yet. But if he can get that all together, like you said, I mean, he can defend. He's got at least the raw material to do that with the length. Wants to be a good defender, doesn't necessarily entirely understand defending at the college level yet. But if you can put all those things together, and he's got a nice mid-range game, doesn't necessarily have a three-pointer really going for him yet, but if you can put all those things together and you can really pair him with Farrell, it makes him, I think, a lot more dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he had 8 rebounds tonight. I think he had 9 all season to this point.
Wow, he did. I didn't even see that.
Yeah. So,
jeez.
That gives you an idea of what he can bring. But like you said, I mean, the trick is for him to find that happy medium, to find that time when you can throttle it down, because at this point it's pretty much full go or nothing.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of what IU assistants said kind of in the middle of this year. Like Robinson's always got the motor going, but you don't always know. You'd rather slow him down, have to slow him down than speed him up. But in the same sense with the guard, he's got to know when to slow down. He's got to know when it's time to take it back, when you're not going to be able to take the ball to the rim, when it's not there, when you can't make that pass, and he's still kind of figuring that out. Obviously, it's part of the maturation process, but again, I think something to be really interested to see, where he gets going, and
he's still making up for a little bit of lost time.
Sure,
with the injury,
knee,
obviously.
Didn't lose a whole lot of time. Obviously, didn't happen until Hoosier Hysteria, but that was at least something. That was that was during preseason ball, and he missed a couple weeks, and that doesn't help a guard like that. So.
Right. But
anyway, so that was IU North Florida. Oakland again on Tuesday, and then I think a really big one next week, a week from now, Notre Dame. I think that's really a game that's going to tell you a lot about where this team is. All right, thanks everybody.